our brothers and sisters, these are our brothers and sisters who they're moving back home. They've never been here. Some of them, they've never visited here. They were not born here. They were taken long time ago. They have no even idea what Africa is. They have seen on TV or on movies, and we all know things that they show on movies and television. It has nothing to do with, it's not the Africa we know.
The day that we discover who we are, discover where we belong, and we go there, is the day that we begin to unify. And the day we begin to unify is the day that we will find our destiny and our purpose. And it's the day that they will begin to leave. They will not leave as long as we stay where they are. They will leave Africa when we return home. You will not progress in Africa until all of your brothers and sisters
are here.
The ones who don't come, they don't belong, because in their own minds, they have decided that they shall remain in somebody else's land. And so I can be a proud Caribbean person. I am, only because I'm an African.
I love that. I love that. Because you're proud an African, you're proud
That's
Caribbean.
why.
Wow.
No other reason.
That's beautiful. I love this conversation. Let me ask you this.
Tell me.
You said something very, very important, and I think a lot of us, we are struggling with our identity.
Yes.
I said this before, that
on the continent and off the continent.
and outside the continent. I said this before, that we kind of have confused identity because of slavery, because of colonialism, because of how much colonialism did to Africa. They did everything to take away the identity by renaming the places, by teaching us their languages. Today you have Africans who appreciate more of a Western culture than their own culture. You are here in Tanzania, you have experienced a lot, people treating you differently or treating a white man differently, above their own people, simply because of the color and all this stuff. We've spoken about that. So we have this struggle of identity, and I think that's one of the reasons why we are detached from each other. Like we don't realize that we are one people.
We're actually family, literally.
We are family, and we're gonna talk about that. We don't realize that, and I think this is what the division of Africa is a business to them, and I think that this is one of the things that they're trying to protect as much as we can. For example, for diaspora to move back home, to have that Black consciousness, for us to know who we are, because we all went through. You guys, you went through slavery, we went through colonialism, but all these things. It was intentionally to take away our identity, to confuse us, to divide us, to separate us, so that we can be weak and they can control us and manage us.
Divide and conquer, yes.
Exactly. But let me ask you this. You said you have discovered who you are. Who are you? I'd like to know that.
Okay, so we have to keep it 100.
Yeah.
So I do have European ancestry.
Yes.
That's where Whitehead comes from, British name. In my case, it's not a name that I inherited from a slave owner, because one of my ancestors, the original Whitehead, was a European.
To be honest with you, when I saw the name Whitehead, I was like, is this the nickname? Is this have a meaning behind? Whitehead. But today name. I saw you really have Whitehead.
I grew up in the Caribbean. That was a joke. The joke was, your name is Whitehead.
Your head is white.
That name suits you. But my hair is blonde because of albinism. You see, this is the thing now. See, that's what we have to know. I have to explain this. I have to do it over another channel, and I have to always explain it until people get to know who I am. And not because sometimes our people on the continent and off the continent, not so much the Caribbean, but in the States, we get hung up on skin color without knowing why. So I have European ancestry, but my skin is not white because of my European ancestry. My skin is white because of albinism, right? A form of albinism that is not as like
as
what
strong
you see,
as
yeah, but it is. My wife always telling me that. She said, you don't have the full thing, you don't have the full thing. Stop saying that. I said, I don't care. People need to just get over it, right? Already.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, my African American mother, I inherited its X-linked, form of it. I inherited from her. That's the irony in the whole thing. My African American mother, my black mother, she is the one I inherited from. My father, who has way back, European, but he has strong Ghanaian ancestry. So ethnically, I discovered, like I said earlier, that I'm from a tribe called, at least one on my father's side, Ga. I don't know what my mother, she passed away, and she never did the DNA test. We don't know for sure, but she's African. So if who I am, identity-wise, first of all, I am an African born in the Americas, raised in the Caribbean. That's the way I can describe myself. I have to describe myself first. I'm an African. A lot of African diaspora struggle with that, whether they're from the Caribbean, whether they're from the U.S. I'm not saying all. A lot of us struggle with that. Whether from Latin America, I mentioned the Dominican Republic, even Puerto Rico. They struggle with that. I'll give you a quick story, if I may.
Absolutely.
So, in Puerto Rico, which is in the Caribbean, they speak Spanish, they speak English. It's another colony of the United States. I'm driving that point home because the high and mighty United States that talk about sovereignty of people and the right for people to be independent and democracy and whatnot, they have colonies. Puerto Rico is one of them, along with the Virgin Islands. So in Puerto Rico, about 70% of the people, 76% of the people, just like Cuba, are actually mixed with African. Spanish people mix with African. What do you call it? Emancipation took place much sooner in Puerto Rico and Latin America than it did the Caribbean and it did the United States, right? All right. So this lady got married to a Texan, a white Texan guy. She's a Puerto Rican. It's a story my mother told me many years ago. She had blonde hair, she had green eyes, and she had white skin. And she married this Texan, or this Texan married her. And she got pregnant soon after being married. And she gave birth to a brown-skinned child. And this Texan, he's a guy from Texas, in the South. He got angry. You cheated on me. This is not my child. She started to cry. She said, I never cheated on you. This is your child. How can you give birth to a... Right? And she just cried. She wouldn't explain. She kept saying, this is your child. This is your child. I promise you, I've never been with anybody else. This is your child. So he complained to her mother. Her mother, being naive, as so many Caribbean people are, especially in that time, 50 years, 60, 70 years ago, she says, oh, that's an easy one to solve. That's your child. I'm sure that's your child. I can explain. She not understanding the problem the man was having. She said, let me show you why the child looks like that. They went to the countryside in Puerto Rico. And as they're approaching this old house, there's this woman sitting down with a pipe, She's puffing away on her tobacco pipe. Pitch black as the ace of spades. She said, this is the reason why the child came out that color. This is my mother, her grandmother.
Wow.
You see?
Wow.
So if he was paying attention, because my mother said, this is just on the light side. This woman who was light skinned, almost white or white, her hair was straight only because she was perming it and he didn't know it was permed hair. If he was paying attention, he would have known that she's black because she had all the curves, but he wasn't paying attention. the clothes come from Africa, not from Europe. That's just in the light side. So there is an awakening that's taking place. We have been taught to think of ourselves as, I am an Antiguan, I'm a Jamaican, I'm a Dominican, I am a Venezuelan, I'm a Dominican. We've been socialized to think in terms of nationality, right? And that's been the problem of the Caribbean. It was when Marcus Garvey came that he began to dismantle that mindset, and we saw what happened to him, right? And so my mother, now who am I? So my father and my mother, my actual birth parents, who I've been referring to all this while, my actual blood parents, I've been referring to. But I have another set of parents. And it's important I mention them for a couple of reasons. So from the age of 6.5, my brother and I was 6.5, he was 4.5. We were raised by another family from the Virgin Islands. Yes, I knew my father, and I interacted with my actual birth father, worked with him in the summers. He was a professional chef, pastry chef. I would spend time with him, but most of my time was spent with our other, parents, who he allowed to raise his sons, because he traveled a lot and he worked a lot in different countries. And this, my parents, they were from an older generation. I want to show you who I am and why I'm the way I am. I'm 60, I'll be 61 in November, but I was raised by my parents, my adopted parents, not legally adopted, but adopted in everything but legally. My mother was born in 1921. My father, my actual father, was born in the 1940s. But my mother, who raised me, and my father, they were born in the 1920s, before World War II and just after World War I. She was from Antigua, but she was born, her father was from Antigua, but she was born in the Dominican Republic. I'm sorry. Her mother was from St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, the Danish West Indies. That generation was very Afrocentric, only they did not know. They were closer to slavery, because my grandmother was born in 1895, right? And her father was born a slave. Okay? And so my adopted mother was an herbalist, not a witch doctor. She used herbs that was handed down from generation to generation from Africa to heal people without the witchcraft. Right? She was what we call a griot. A griot is someone who is a culture bearer. A culture bearer is someone who knows the different cultural stories and culture, the food and the medicine and everything. So I grew up listening to what we call Anansi stories. You may not know about those in East Africa. Or do you have them?
No.
You have Anansi?
I don't know. There might be, but I don't know.
Anansi stories are proverbs and stories that are rooted in African culture, that's handed down from generation to generation.
We have this.
To teach moral lessons.
We have that.
So Anansi is the spider. He's a trickster.
My dad used to teach us.
Yes.
My dad used
so I grew up listening to those. That generation knew those things. So at a young age, my brother and I, we were exposed to African culture. Only we thought it was Caribbean culture, because our parents, they thought it was just Caribbean culture. It was when I went to Africa I realized, this is African culture. So I am the way I am because of that.
So basically you had to unlearn that.
I had to unlearn
in a way that you know the stories, but you just didn't know that this is where it
came from. All the food we eat, we have fungi. You call I don't know what you call cornmeal that's cooked And it's like ugali, but it's corn meal, yellow corn. It's same ugali, it's just yellow corn.
Ugali,
we call it fungi. In Ghana, they call it fufu. Same thing.
It's the same. It's ugali because they use cassava, they use corn, they use wheat flour, some other places.
Breadfruit, rice flour, any flour.
Absolutely, rice. Yes.
Same. So we are now rediscovering. Many of us are rediscovering. The young people today are rediscovering, because of the internet, rediscovering their African identity. We always knew with our head that we are Africans because only people from Africa look the way we look with our features. But now we're beginning to understand that we're not only from Africa, but we are actually Africans. And there's a difference. Identifying with a place and identifying with the people of the place.
I think that's one of the struggles that I think a lot of African descendants are struggling with.
Right.
To define themselves as Africans,
as people,
or as they're from Africa.
Right.
Because we see that a lot. Like, I'm from Africa, my ancestors are from there, but
exactly.
I am.
Right.
Yeah.
So you'll have someone who is a descendant from someone who's from somebody who's from Amsterdam or Holland, or someone who's from Britain who's Caucasian, right? Who will tell you, I'm an African, I'm a South African, because they were born and raised in South Africa, and their parents were born and raised in South Africa, and their grandparents and their great-grandparents, their great-great-grandparents, all the way back to Zulu Shaka time, but they're Europeans, and they get to choose based on the context who they're talking to claim what identity they want to claim. They are actually Europeans, and they know it, and they claim that when they're dealing with Europeans. But when they're dealing with Africans on the continent, they say, I'm South African. Right? But yet they're not African because they don't eat the foods that the Africans eat. They don't sing the music. They don't respect or regard us.
They don't even live.
They don't even live. Thank you. I was trying to even avoid going there, but that's it. So you want to claim Africanness, like Elon Musk, for example, just because you were born in a place, you identify with a place, but you never can identify with the people. How can you?
You can.
And so we need to get to the place in our consciousness as diasporans where we say, you know what? I am an African. Not because of the place, but because of
who I am.
And so I'm an African living in the Caribbean. I'm an African in America. I'm an African. The Chinese, I use this example all the time. The Indians, with all due respect for them, I'm just being,
it's radical truth.
So you go to Singapore, Singapore is not China. Singapore is dominated by Chinese, but it's not China. When you ask someone in Singapore what they are, whether they are native, indigenous Singaporean or Chinese, if they're Chinese, they will say, I'm Singaporean nationality, but people will say, but I'm Chinese. Their family might have been in Singapore for 100 years, 150 years, 200 years. I'm Chinese. Nobody questions that. Nobody says, no, you're not Chinese, you're Singaporean. Or the Chinese in China doesn't say, oh, you are not Chinese, you're Singaporean. They identify them as Chinese. They look at them and they say, they see the name, they see the features, they see and they say, yes, you're Chinese, but you're Singaporean Chinese, but you're Chinese. All right? Indians in the Grenada, in the Caribbean, doesn't matter if they've been there 100 years, 200 years, 50 years, it doesn't matter how many generations, everybody, Indian. I'm St. Lucian, but Indian St. Lucian. Oh, I'm whatever, you just name it. So why is it that we struggle and other people outside of our ethnicity struggle with us identifying ourselves as who we actually are? And then the place where we are from. There is a reason for that. And for me, I know the answer, but we need to grapple with the reason. We need to ask ourselves why. Why is it a problem for us? Why is it a problem for Africans on the continent to acknowledge that we look like you? There's a history proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that we were originated from Africa. We were taken, our ancestors were taken against our will, their will. Why is it so hard to acknowledge that we are Africans?
Yeah.
No, we didn't grow up in Africa to learn the culture firsthand, but we are Africans, just like the Chinese, who is separated from China, is Chinese, and the Indians are Indian, and the Arabs and the Virgin Islands and the Arabs all over the Caribbean are Arabs. Why are we struggling? We are struggling because we are socialized to struggle with that issue. We are socialized to see ourselves differently from who we really are. And as a result, if you don't know who you are, how can you ever know your destiny and your purpose?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good one.
If you don't know who you are, how can you even answer any other question about anything concerning yourself if you don't know who you are?
Give me the iPad.
And so one of the struggles that our people have, we as diasporans have, is that when we come home, it's not easy. It's not easy to tell your family that you're going to Africa.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can appreciate, Paul, I don't know if you can appreciate, Mike, I don't know if you can appreciate how, just imagine, as an African continent born African, okay? Someone coming to the realization that, you know what, this is not my home, it's never been my home.
Yeah.
It's all I know, but it's not my home. And I want to go home. But to do so, you have to tell the vast majority of your family that you're moving away from them 7,000, sometimes 10,000, sometimes 14,000 miles away to the continent. To tell them that I'm not going to be able to just fly back anytime I want to because it's very expensive to travel to Africa by design.
Wow.
To leave cousins behind, to leave brothers. I left a sister behind, 2 brothers behind. I left a whole washload of cousins. The family is huge. I have cousins all over the Caribbean, all over the United States. But the ones closest to leave them behind. Many times our families see it as a form of rejection to go back to Africa.
Oh God.
Right? Can you imagine that?
God, please.
And then for all the research, we read books, we read articles, we look at videos for months, for years, 2-3 years, doing the best we can. We make friendships to try to learn as much as we can. Nothing can prepare you really for Africa once you read. Right? You're starting all over again. And then to be told you're Mzungu. To be told that you're an American because of my passport. Who created the passport system and why? You see, this is the side of the narrative that we don't articulate well enough to explain to our brothers and sisters. And you need to understand. But then we come, at the same time, we come with all kinds of false and erroneous ideas about our African brothers and sisters on the continent. We come with funny notions and beliefs that comes from that propaganda machine called education, called the media. So we come with our baggage, right? And then because of colonization, you interact with us because of your baggage. And because we don't understand each other, we don't understand that we are paying a price. You don't understand we are paying a price to leave. It doesn't matter how much money we have. You can have a lot of money. I can tell you that people who have come with money and they have invested and they lost the money because why? Because people saw them as an ATM. People saw them as a bank. People saw them as a get-rich-quick opportunity. They didn't see them as brothers and sisters who work hard for that money, who endured all kinds of discrimination for that money. Or you're just seen as a meal ticket. That's all. You're not my brother. You're an American. I don't care that you're black like me. But then we came and we are coming. So many of us are coming thinking, oh, we are better than. Don't you know we come from the West, you know? We know more than you, you know? And I'm saying that we are all been dealt a raw, bad card with colonization and slavery. And until we start asking questions, before we start providing answers, until we start thinking about the other person first, their perspective, and not our own. we will never break down these walls that have been set up for us to hide behind. The people, my friend, Brother Mike, the people who are coming, let's at least acknowledge that they decided to leave their family. Now, unfortunately, there are those who come, and because they don't have their, what I call resilience, relocation resilience, they know they have this passport that allows them to go back. They don't give the continent a chance.
Yeah.
They don't give their brothers and sisters a chance. They always have this plan C or backup plan. But I'm saying that the time has to come for us as African diasporans, and the time has come for us as Africans on the continent to sanction ourselves. Remember that phrase I used earlier?
I love that. Yeah.
To sanction ourselves.
I love that.
We need to get to the point where we realize that, you know what, we only have each other.
Oh,
good, bad, indifferent, issues. We have each other and our motherland. I think our passport that allows us to go back when things get tough, as opposed to go to another African country, or as opposed to think about how I can adjust my thinking, how can I be resilient, how can I assimilate, how can I not be so focused on being around my own, who we call our own, which is diaspora, when our own is all of us. And let's see how we can get outside of our comfort zone, but with wisdom, and start to assimilate. We don't even want to learn the language, most of us. Me, I want to learn, but my head is 61 years old, right? A simple greeting in Swahili goes a long way. A simple greeting in Tree, if you're in Ghana, in Zulu, in Shona, if you're in Zimbabwe, or it goes a long way to break down the walls. And I think that's the problem. The problem we have is, and we don't want to admit it. Africans on the continent don't want to admit it. Diasporans don't want to admit it. All of us got a raw deal, and because of it, we don't know each other. We don't even know ourselves. And we need to rediscover ourselves. Africans on the continent need to rediscover Africans. Who they are, who we are. We Africans from outside, who born outside, we need to rediscover who we are. And I think we can only do that if we learn from each other.
Yeah.
I'm rambling, I'm sorry, but
No. I have so many things, but I didn't want to interrupt you, because
I appreciate that.
What you are sharing, it's very important, and I think it's a fundamental and it's a foundation of the unity we want. I'm going to start with rediscovering ourselves and knowing who we are. And you said something very interesting. You say that you cannot answer any other question if you don't answer that question.
No.
If you do not know who you are, then everything else that is up there, it's wrong. Maybe you're doing for someone else. Maybe you're doing because maybe you are carrying someone else's identity or something that you're taught. But if you do not know who you are, everything changes. So there are like 5 important questions of life. 5 fundamental questions. The first one is that, who am I? Identity, your identity. And the second one is, where am I from? The source, my originality. Where am I from? The third question is, why am I here?
Exactly.
The purpose. It's talking about purpose. Your purpose. Why are you there? The fourth question, what can I do? Potential. Your potential. And the last one is, where am I going? The destiny. So when you're talking about who am I, it reminded me about these 5 fundamental questions of life. And it reminded me that if I identify myself, just for the sake of this conversation, let's say as African, because we know our continent was never used to be called, Africa.
Right.
Yes. If I identify myself as an African, then even when I come to the continent, I'm going to associate myself with the fellow Africans because I see myself in them. I see that I'm similar. I am them. But if I identify myself as someone else,
anything else,
I'm going to create a barrier.
Anything else, not even something.
Anything else. And that's what we see. We're talking about this area that one of the things that I hate the most, and I've spoken about this a lot of time here, it's seeing all these different groups of local Africans or diaspora or African descendants, which in a way it keep creating division among ourselves, even inside the continent, which was designed long time ago for us to be apart from each other. It's just like the time that our ancestors were taken away to go to those countries. The same thing is happening today, that they come here but we're still divided. They're taken away from us.
What's the use?
Exactly. What's the use? Because we have forgotten who we are. And even the local Africans, if we know who we are and we know that they are also Africans, we're going to change our mindset. Start looking at them as an ATM machine, that I need to get this, I need to get support, I need to get that. The same mentality that we have in our leadership. Receiving loans, receiving aids, that we cannot do anything by ourselves. We need your support. We need this and that. And that's why a lot of us, we like, leaders like Dr. Magufuli, like Sankara, like Nkrumah, even Pierre Lumumba these days, people who they believe in the ability and the potential of Africanness, because they knew who they are, they knew what they can do, the potential in their identity. Yeah. Another thing that I wanted to add is when you're talking about moving away from far away, I got very emotional because I was reminded. I was reminded of the story in the Bible of Abraham.
Yes.
When God, he told Abraham that you need to go to a place that he didn't even know where he was going. He didn't even know where he was going, but it took faith, uncompromised faith, for him to leave everything that he had, his family and everything. And most of the time we don't think how difficult that was. That was not an easy decision to just stand up and start leaving, go to somewhere else that he didn't know. But he left everything that he had in that place to go to a place that he didn't know. It reminded me that, and it reminded me of African descendants these days who are moving back home, that they're leaving everything they have. They're leaving family, they're leaving land, they're leaving jobs. We're having those stories. They're leaving everything they have to go to a new place that they've never been before. They heard a lot of negative things about it. They know that our ancestors are coming from them, but they've never been there. But moving, starting a new life in another place. So I think one thing that we can both learn, African descendants and local Africans. For African descendants, we can learn that this new place that you're going, it has its own challenge. It's not a land full of milk and honey. For example, Canaan, Israelite, they thought when they go to Canaan, it's just gonna be milk and honey and all those stuff. And the report they gave, Joshua, the report he gave, it was a little bit different from other people. They gave a different report. They're like, we saw these giants people and we are scared. We don't know if we're going to survive. So we have to know that this new land that we are going, which is Africa, the promised land, we have to know that it is a place with challenges. It's not a food that it's already cooked. No, but it's a land that needs to be cultivated. And it's gonna take the local Africans, and also it's gonna take African descendant diaspora, both of us, to come together as one to cultivate this land. Because it requires for all of us to come to our home, that this is ours, the entire family is here. Now let's cultivate this land. But if I come with mentality that I'm gonna go to that place, it's gonna welcome me, everything is gonna be heaven on earth, you're not gonna find it here, because you have a part to play into this land, into this place. And for local Africans here, also we have to know that our brothers and sisters, these are our brothers and sisters who they're moving back home. They've never been here. Some of them, they've never visited here. They were not born here. They were taken long time ago. They have no even idea what Africa is. They have seen on TV or on movies, and we all know things that they show on movies and television. It has nothing to do with, it's not the Africa we know. So we need to be tolerant towards one another, and we need to understand one another. We need to give each other a chance. As a diaspora, I need to give the chance to the continent. As local Africans, we need to give each other a chance. We need to understand that it's not an easy decision to move back to the new land. Some people, they will choose to remain where they are today, to live their comfortable life in a way.
Or even uncomfortable life.
Even uncomfortable life.
Because the devil they say, they have a saying back home.
Exactly.
The devil you know is better than the devil you don't.
You don't know.
That's what...
And to be honest, we have witnessed, I was telling you this area, a lot of African descendant who just decided to give up and to live out of Africa. Because it's not the place that they thought it would be, that, you know what, I would rather go. And I'm not taking that like any bad or worse experience that I've taken. That's why we're addressing this. I think it has everything to do with that mindset, like, you know, where I'm coming from and where I'm going. Like, you know, I said this before, that if you want to come here, then you have to you have to be you have to forget everything. You have to know nothing, to come from the scratch, to start learning everything from the scratch. And I think we have a job to play, us as, you know, SNOA and my brother here. We have a job to play to educate our people. It's gonna take everything we got, because the issue with money and how I look at you, like I look at you and I just know that, oh, this guy, he has money.
My problem is worse than the average, because in the Dominican Republic was like that. Here it's the same thing. People can just look at you and they can tell that you're not Tanzanian.
How much you have?
No, I can tell you're not Tanzanian. You can just look at you. Not. Because they just start to walk up and start to speak English and what have you. But my problem is, in my case, because of my complexion, it's worse. Because people think I'm a white guy. Yeah. And they just definitely he's got. But it's neither here nor there, right? It's neither here nor there. This whole thing about money and no money is not it. I think what we have to realize, that before you can know where you're from and embrace it, before you can know your purpose, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, before you can
potential.
know your potential, before you can, you don't get to pick which one of those things you start with first. The first one, you have to identify
yourself. Exactly.
If you don't do that one day, you've lost. That's it. You're done.
Yeah.
Because if you are working with the identity given to you, or you've been socialized to believe about yourself, or based on wrong information, all right, you're going to end up working for someone else's benefit. Absolutely. Someone else's purpose. Absolutely. Someone else's destiny.
Yeah. You cannot work for yourself if you don't know who you are. You can't. You're going to be swayed away by any wind. And if you don't know who you are, the world is going to define you.
They're going to define you. And who defines you owns you.
Yeah, exactly.
So now that's the next thing. So if I know who I am, if we know who we are, okay. So Africa was already divided before Europe came, and not in a negative way, but it was divided into, I think, 4 or 5 different zones. Right? You had Misra, or Misraim. We call them Egyptians now. Egypt is actually a Greek word. It's not even African.
You know, Africa is Misri.
Misra, the Misraim, those are who we call Egyptians. They were descendants of Ham. Okay. Then you had another descendant of Ham was the place that we call Libya today. It's not even that place alone. It's even bigger than that. All right. The Sahel, the northern part, especially Sahel. Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, all those places, and those places that are occupied. I'm sorry to say it that way. I shouldn't have said it that way, but let me just. Those places where the majority of the people are a people who have replaced the original inhabitants. They replaced people who are descendants of Ham. Talking about knowing ourselves now. That's what we're talking about. You talk about radical truth, right? I can talk radical
truth.
Please.
I'm free
to talk radical truth, right?
Go ahead.
So long as I don't mess up the YT algorithm, right?
Go ahead.
I'll be careful the words I choose, but I can talk radical truth.
Go ahead, sir.
To show you or to speak to the issue of identity and who we are in the diaspora and who you are in what they call sub-Saharan Africa, from Senegal over to Ethiopia and down to South Africa and everything in between. You will find that you have descendants of Shem. Noah had 3 sons. We're not talking religion, we're talking history now.
Absolutely.
People will say, oh, they've gone into religion. You see, that's what they want you to believe.
Exactly.
That is religion.
So that we may never know who we are.
We are talking history, we are talking
the truth, radical truth.
Okay? So part of the continent of Africa belongs to Ham, and part of it belongs to Shem, the descendants of Shem. And we know about Foot. We know about Misra. We know about Canaan. They say Canaan in English. It's really Canaan. And we know about Kush, right? So we have Nilots, Uganda, Tanzania, small percentage of the people, Sudan, and other places among the population. But they're not all Kushites. In fact, you have, I just want to speak to the fact that there are different groups, okay? But in Africa, we have Shemites, and the Shemites include the descendants of Abraham. Even the place that they call Israel today. Notice my choice of words. The place that they call Israel. All right? That is actually Africa. It's not the Middle East. There's no such thing as Middle East. Middle East was created. It's a geopolitical construct. Or, in simple words, it's an area that was created, imagined and created to serve a political agenda. All right? They don't want Egypt to be considered Africa.
Yes.
And if Egypt is not Africa, how can Northeast Africa, which is what they call Israel, how can that not be Africa? So they have to define Egypt as being the beginning of the Middle East and across. And why would they want to do that?
It doesn't make sense.
Why would they want to? It makes sense when you think about, if you know who we are, then it makes sense. So the bottom line is that Egypt is Middle East, therefore Saudi Arabia is the Middle East, Israel is the Middle East, whatever that is not Africa. You explain away all the accomplishments of the Egyptians technologically. You explain it away, but it's not Africans that did that. That's the narrative. Because at the end of the day, people in the African continent that look a certain way are not supposed to be capable of advanced technology and engineering. So I'm not going to go too far down this line because that's another subject for another day. But I just want to plant the seed in the mind of the viewer that every black person in Africa are Africans, but not everyone are descendants of Ham. As we've been taught in Bible seminaries, as we've been taught in churches. And in other religions, the black man is the descendant of Ham. No, not all. And once we go down that rabbit hole and we peel back the layers of the onion to discover, okay, if not every African is a descendant of Ham and some are descendants of Shem, who are they? And what are they? You will discover that the slavers who went to West Africa to enslave our people, and the ones who came to East Africa to enslave our people in East Africa, enslaved the descendants of Shem. And those of you who are listening and watching, you need to find out. We can talk about it another time. When what I'm saying is, when they went to Africa to get some of my ancestors and marched, in the case of my family, 7 clan members, 7 clans of my family, from Sesame, Ghana to the fort, the Danish fort, they knew who they were coming for. When they went to Biafra, Igbo land, when they went to Kikongo, Congo, they went to Angola, what we call Angola, what we call Nigeria. And they went for specific people.
They knew what they came for.
They knew who they came for. When they came to East Africa, they knew who they were enslaving, and they knew why. Now we are fast forwarding to 2023, and something is happening globally. And it's being covered up as best they can, but they cannot cover it for long. A shift is taking place. But we will miss the shift as the diaspora, and we will miss the shift as African continentals if we don't understand and know who we are. And they're doing their best to make sure that this shift doesn't happen. Because when we unify, that's the final nail in the coffin of what is called the West.
Yeah.
And if we think we're going to look to the East to get out of this mess, or to see progress and development in Africa,
we're lying to ourselves.
We're lying to ourselves.